Just within the last hour or two that Daronte Jones, who's been well-traveled despite only 41 years on this earth, just looked at his resume, and he's been around the NFL and college football at some major stops. He has landed the D coordinator job there for your beloved Bayou Bengals.
As reported by Bruce Feldman, I will say this: the deal has not been signed yet. The contract is still there. Bruce Feldman is as close as it gets to Coach Orgeron, as everyone knows, with his book Flip the Script. But from my sources inside LSU, it's, hey, you know what? We've been here twice. Like, until it's done, let's wait a little bit here. And here's the thing about Daronte Jones. Yes, well-traveled. He's got the resume, but there's going to be a lot of questioning of Coach O here. This is not a experienced defensive coordinator. He's a well-experienced defensive backs coach, and he's had a lot of great opportunities in the NFL, 5 years in the NFL. But at the same time, did he get the opportunities he deserved in the NFL to ever raise up to get a coordinator job? Would we see that on his resume if there had been more fair hiring for minority coaches such as Daronte Jones? Who's to know? I think we'll find that out very shortly. What I do know about Daronte Jones, before this hire, I barely knew much of him. But what I did know of him from seeing a few clips, especially seeing, I think it was Hard Knocks or some type of NFL documentary where he was one of the position coaches in one of his 5 years. And he just had a lot of presence, a lot of intensity, and he was a fantastic teacher. And so those are a few of the first things that came across from me. And it seemed that whenever he had premium talent on his team, he elevated that talent. For instance, Rashad Jones at Miami, a team-high 122 tackles in 2017 and a Pro Bowl selection. And that was just his first – that was, I think, his second year as a professional coach. In his first year at Miami, they had 16 picks, the third most in the NFL. And the year before that, when he was at Wisconsin under former LSU defensive coordinator Dave Aranda, the shiny bald dome of Dave Aranda was his coach there, his DC in Wisconsin. And he was the DB's coach. And I believe they allowed 7 passing touchdowns all season with this guy as DB's coach. He took the Miami opportunity the next season, and Jim Leonard actually followed him. So this guy, he's had some interesting opportunities at Bowie State, though. I will say this, small college, but he was DC there, co-DC there, and they were ranked 3rd nationally each year in defense. So take that for what it is. That is the stat. And so I don't know. Daronte Jones is LSU's future defensive coordinator. It's interesting. It's an interesting proposition, interesting prospects. It's definitely a far and wide improvement over Bo Pelini. You know how high I was on Bo Pelini. Higher than Snoop Dogg on a Sunday morning in Willie Nelson's tour bus. I loved the Pelini hire, but guess what? It turned out he had the complete opposite energy I thought he was going to have. Just think about it, Mark. You thought coming into the season, maybe if they struggled or whatever, Pelini would still have that fire, that innovation to kind of figure it out. He didn't. He showed that. He did not. He just didn't. I don't know if there was something going on that we don't know about behind the scenes. I've heard a lot of whispers. I'm not going to speculate, not going to announce, but there was some stuff going on that just withered the man. I see fire from Daronte Jones. I see energy. In our Saturday article, when the news came down that, yes, they would indeed interview Daronte Jones, we wrote, who knows what will go down in the interviewing process? We'll have to wait and see, although I'll say a few things about Jones. He always seems to get the job. He's a great teacher. He's a strong man manager. He understands the psychology of the game. I think he may win this job if it's up to him to wow Coach O. But it's all up to Coach O and what he's looking for in a DC. So it was like, if it's up to this guy, if they really believe in, like, if this guy has the energy coming through that door, and I have that same type of Joe Brady feeling, that same, I'm pulling the trigger. And it appears that with Daronte, you know, that was very immediate.
Your words proved to be prophetic from your Saturday article, Lon, because as you highlight, the resume's impressive at the coaching position, not the D coordinator position. So that's the glaring concern right there. The stops have been meaningful, both at the NFL level with the Vikings, the Bengals, and the Dolphins. You highlighted how he was able to improve those positional units.
Yeah.
Dave Aranda, Wisconsin. Of course, the Badgers are always solid on defense, if not top 5 to 10 defense in the nation. And he did a great job there. It's just you would expect a defensive coordinator to have his first stop as a D coordinator somewhere in a group of 5 or a lower power 5 position, not at the likes of LSU.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's why I mentioned maybe the lack of, you know, fair minority hiring in the NFL could have impeded maybe that lack of defensive coordinator resume. I will say that, you know, he did have an impact on Louisiana high school football here for a few years. And he was mentored by Mickey Joseph, wide receivers coach here at LSU. And, you know, there was other people who broke certain aspects of this news, but the one piece of news we did break was that Mickey Joseph was the man who recommended to hire, not only to interview, but to hire him. So Mickey Joseph was like, this man has a vision. This man is, he's just very relatable to the kids. And in fact, he's a fantastic recruiter as well. And he knows Louisiana, which was a little shocking to me. I didn't really know he had such ties. I knew about the Aranda tie, but I didn't know he had such ties to Louisiana. And once I heard that he was tight with Mickey and Vance Joseph, the Joseph brothers, Vance, who was once with the Denver Broncos, I knew this was just gold. And Coach Orgeron followed that. It seemed he really impressed them in the interview room, but it's got to be beyond that. It's got to be, this is such a talented defensive unit for 2021, Mark. This, not only the #1 defensive line in America, potentially, if used to the absolute peak of their powers, if their talents are maximized, we have the 2 best corners in America as well, Derek Stingley, Eli Ricks. And then you got safeties, Todd Harris, Mo Hampton, Jordan Tolles. You got a lot of guys there who could really just, we haven't really seen their game at the ultimate, and yet they still, Todd Harris had 2 picks and a forced fumble. They're still making plays. And then you got Sage Ryan, who could be that nickel cover corner guy this year as a freshman. So we could solve that problem right there. Then you got Jay Ward in behind. So Cordell Flott, who had a really bad 2020, but then he had an awesome 2019, probably could rebound in 2021. So you've got just fireworks all over this defensive situation here at LSU. The linebackers is where it comes into question. Bo Pelini, I feel like he just did not get to know some of these guys well enough. You got Josh White, freshman, who's just fantastic, jack of all trades guy. Philip Webb, he had some injury troubles, but it would have been great to see him in when he was fit. Antoine Sampa coming back from a knee, but then you got Devontae Lee. This guy was an absolute beast. Coach O, he recruited him as a receiver, but he did say in that Louisiana high school state championship game when he was a senior, I believe, that Devontae Lee was the best defensive player on the field at the Superdome when he was recruiting him as a receiver. So he always remembered that. Lee is a fantastic linebacker specimen, and we just never saw him used when LSU really needed one. But then you got Damone Clark, who had a bad 2020, but he had a great 2019. So we could also see him rebound with Daronte Jones. Daronte Jones, is he the guy who can come in and inject the confidence into someone like Damone Clark, into someone like Cordell Flott? Can he get them to shake the past of 2020? But can he also come in and make sure that they remember what happened this last year? Not just forget it, wipe the slate clean and move on, but remember how embarrassing that defensive performance was and make sure that it never happens again. Because Daronte Jones, if he is to be hired, is carrying the future, of LSU's program for the next 5-6 years on his back. 3 or 4 years just from the mess alone, if it becomes a mess and Orgeron's out and all just the worst case scenario you could imagine. Every Alabama hater's dream could go down. Just hypothetically imagine that. Or it could go completely the other direction. It's just, I feel like this is going to be a love it or hate it hire. It's going to be a maximum high octane or complete zero results. I think you're not going to see anything in the middle. I think if Daronte Jones is given the resources, the support, the encouragement, and I think if the players buy in, most of all, I think Daronte Jones could be a success at least for 1 or 2 years before he takes some other job. Because that's the thing I'm looking at here. I don't feel like Daronte Jones, if he accepts the position, will be here for more than 2 seasons. I feel like it would be back to the NFL to get that coordinator job for him. But who's to see? It's a very interesting situation here. I did not expect LSU to be going down this direction. I thought Glenn Schumann would be the guy. They went after Schumann. They contacted him, as we said, but we didn't really hear much of that. I think maybe that's because Jimmy Sexton is his agent, and Sexton is some anti-LSU vibes, and that was just not going to work out. But Daronte Jones as the sole defensive coordinator, that's very interesting for me. It's what do you think, Mark?
And of course, they wanted to go to Marcus Freeman, who left Cincinnati to go to Notre Dame, and then also the much publicized snafu in pursuing the New Orleans Saints defensive line coach.
Yep, Ryan Nielsen. Yep,
Ryan Nielsen. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love, talking LSU. Defensive coordinator in place, as reported at this point. Daronte Jones, he's been in the NFL and around college football, and you're mentioning that you wouldn't be surprised if he does a fine job, moves on after a couple of years, and that's certainly been his resume. But that's not unlike most assistant coaches around college football in the NFL. They're nomadic in nature. They move on based on head coaches getting fired or moving on, and then they have to scatter as well because most coaches want their own staff in place.
Exactly.
So 2 points I want to clarify here. Just want to make sure I got these straight. Number one would be you didn't necessarily say that LSU had the best cornerback tandem in the nation. You said the 2 best cornerbacks in the nation, number 1 and 2 in Stingley and Ricks.
The 2 best corners in the nation.
Okay. Stingley certainly has that reputation. Eli Ricks had a fine freshman season. I don't know if I would name him the 2nd best cornerback in the nation, but I was just clarifying what you stated.
I think Kyle Trask would disagree with you there.
Two best cornerbacks were playing on the same team. 2 best cornerbacks in the nation. Okay, just wanted to clarify that one point. Second point I wanted to clarify was that it was my thought, and I don't have the data in front of me to try to track this, but the NFL has obviously in the last 10 to 15 years set in place the Rooney Rule to try to bring about equity in the hiring practices. So you're stating that there has been inequity in the hiring practices in the NFL for minorities.
Oh, I mean, that's quite obvious. I mean,
is it?
I'm not reporting anything by saying that. I mean, ask any black coach.
Well, I don't want to just ask black coaches. I think we should ask a cross-sectional, or at least go to the data. I'm not stating my stance one way or the other. I just know that the NFL has actually instituted a mandate to have those individuals interviewed, and in some instances, it could be questioned going the other way. So I'm not stating again. I'm just clarifying your stance that you said that the NFL has been unfair in its hiring practices over the last 10 years or even its history, actually.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I bet it has gone completely the other way with interview opportunities. I bet there's extremism on both sides. There always is, but it's Roger Goodell. No matter what he institutes, it's not going to matter. I mean, giving people an interview opportunity doesn't mean that you're really going to try and give them the job. There's a lot of times that it's just for show, and it's quite obvious, and it's kind of demeaning. And we all know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of guys who know exactly what I'm talking about here. And Daronte Jones, he's been given an opportunity here by Coach O because Coach O believes in him. And there's a lot of head coaches in the NFL who didn't believe in Daronte Jones, who only believed that he was a DB's coach. We'll see. I think he is what it takes to become a great defensive coordinator at LSU. He has every tool there. He has every tool up in here for himself. He has all the experience. He has all the know-how. He's been through the fire. I think that's just the commonality with these hires. Jake Peetz as well. This is a guy, just a well-traveled guy that it's not a sexy name once you hear it. Daronte Jones either. Jake Peetz, Daronte Jones, DJ Mangus. These aren't sexy names like Joe Brady. Like these aren't sexy headline names. But they might get the job done for LSU's big-time headline superstars on the field. It's all who the players will listen to, who the players will buy into, who the players will learn from, who the players will, progress their game from. And yeah, number 2 corner in America, Eli Ricks, behind the number 1 corner in America, Derek Stingley Jr. He will progress his game under Daronte Jones, and it'll help him because Corey Raymond, he's got a lot on his plate, not only being the DB's coach, but then also being the recruiting coordinator for LSU. So Daronte Jones coming in there with some, not only safeties knowledge, but corners knowledge. This guy has a ton of knowledge with the DBs, and that's where LSU were allowing almost 10 passing yards per attempt last year. And it was completely because these quarterbacks would say, okay, there's Stingley, there's Ricks. Well, I'm not going to pass at either of those guys. So I'm just going to attack Cordell Flott and Damone Clark or whoever, linebacker or safety or nickel that is matched up with our slot guy. And we're just going to go to town. And we're just going to ignore these 2 guys on the outside. Well, now we have somebody who hopefully can be an innovator for LSU's defense and actually figure out ways around that and put the right guys in at the right plays. For instance, Cordell Flott this year, trying him out at nickel, that might not be your best idea. It actually might be your freshman Sage Ryan, the 5-star safety, who is actually a fantastic nickel cover. So that Daronte, I don't think he'd be afraid to pull that trigger. Bo Pelini, he obviously was, because we saw that all year, just a complete stubbornness, inability to rotate or mix up his guys. I think Daronte, he won't play favorites. He'll get to know his guys.
Talking LSU with Lon Phillip Sullivan from LSU Odyssey, with Daronte Jones reported to be in play as the defensive coordinator, the next one to replace Bo Pelini at LSU.